You're listening to Street Life, a podcast about street photography with John ST and Mark Davidson.
You're listening to Street Life. I'm Mark Davidson, a street photographer from Melbourne, Australia. And with me, as he always is, the man with the golden flash gun, Mr. John ST. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Mark. And you know full well I don't flash anybody.
No, you don't.
No, I haven't been caught yet.
You haven't caught the flash bug because I'll tell you what, we were just discussing so many more people using flash than a year or two ago on the streets of Melbourne, and I presume Sydney as well. It's extraordinary. It's it's wild out there at the moment.
It's bad. I just said to you, Mark, there's so many people flashing people at the minute. There's going to be an accident. Someone is going to be disorientated, wander out in front of a tram and get killed, and then the government will ban flash.
I hope not, but it is extraordinary because, you know, you wouldn't have seen any flash on the street a year or two ago down here, and now it's so many more street photographers out there. I don't know half the people out there at the moment. It's extraordinary. It's it's becoming really popular, which is it is a good thing, but yeah, it's the poor public wading through, streams of street photographers down at the main stations. It's crazy.
I was out yesterday, and the amount of people with flashes, right? And we live in sunny Sydney, yeah? Well, I do. Out with a flash, literally going, I am Bruce Gilden, rip off, bang, no. Smash, bosh, right in the chops.
Really?
And then they smile at each other, and then they look at it, go, look at the photo I got. And the poor person's like, what the hell just happened?
Oh, no.
You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
And then 2 meters down the street, bosh, there's his mate.
Bang, there it is again. Jesus.
Gonna have all these people on medication.
I don't know what's going on at the moment. Is there some sort of YouTube channel where everyone's getting inspired at the moment? I don't understand it.
I think it's you, Mark.
It's definitely not me.
I think they've gone, who's winning all the competitions at the minute? Who's this Mark Davidson dude? What's he doing? He's doing a bit of flash. Yeah. And then they go on YouTube, and then they follow up, and then they come across Bruce Gilden that says, I'm walking here. You know what I mean? Poof. And then they just smash it in his face, and that just becomes a trend. You remember when light and shadow used to be all the trend?
I do, yeah. You
remember when silhouettes used to be all the trend?
Oh, that's so
all the stuff I'm still doing because I like doing it, but people have moved on now, so they're chasing the trend, trying to get Insta likes.
Well, it's not going to get you Insta likes, I promise you that. But I don't know, I've sort of kind of used it as fill flash, really. In my sort of work, but we don't want too many people with Bruce Gilden in the public. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare if that keeps happening.
Well, they're going to see you coming a mile off, aren't they?
Yeah,
because they'll have just been hit 15 times in a row, 150 metres back, and they're going to go, look, there's another plonker with a flash. And then before you know it, bosh, mate, you got one right on the chops, haven't you?
Do you remember that show Gladiators, where you have to sort of run the gauntlet? it's like
what a shit show that was. Did you actually watch that? You were one of the 10 people in Australia that watched Gladiators. Exactly. I was one of the other 10 as well, because I remember it too. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, Gladiators.
Oh dear. Well,
Flashman.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I've got some more show and tell for you this week.
Have you? Show and tell.
We should have some intro music.
Is it clean? Oh, I hope this is clean. Thank God people can't watch.
I got this book yesterday. Chris Killips.
Oh, that's nice.
Sea Cold. Do you know this one, John? It's from your neck of the woods. From just above Newcastle, Linemouth, I think.
Wow.
It was
Weymouth, yeah.
Yeah, it's extraordinary work. I mean, many of our listeners may have already got this book, but it's fantastic. He just photographed the people on the beach over a number of years. Coal would sort of drift out into the oceans, and people would come and collect it. And it's extraordinary work. I love it. It's a great book. That's
how people who couldn't afford to buy coal had to heat their homes and stuff. Yeah. Wow. My granddad was actually a miner, so
really
he worked in the pits, in Shields. And it's not like the nice clean pits that we have or mining that we have in Australia. He was up to his neck in water with just a pick.
Jeez.
So yeah. So that was my granddad.
Well, have you seen this book?
No, I haven't. But when you come over to Sydney, bring it with you and I'll have a bit of a squiz. Or I might just go and buy it. Where'd you get it from, Mark?
I got it from Metropolis Bookstore in Melbourne. So it's very good.
Oh, so good. You're supporting local business. Good for you. Well done. That's nice. And how much was it, Mark? Was it like a princely sum?
Oh, Jesus, wasn't cheap. $80.
Oh, here. $80.
Yeah.
That's basically a Big Mac, fries, and a soft drink now. So it's Cost of living crisis.
Yeah, no, they're not cheap, but happy to pay for it. It's good work. So,
Yeah.
and it's kind of apt because our guest today, who's been waiting online, John, we're sort of keep
We've got a guest again, another one.
We do.
Oh, this is getting to become a bit of a habit, Mark. I thought it was just us chatting and sharing our bullshit, but we've got a guest.
Well, he photographs by the seaside too, so it's kind of appropriate.
He does. We do have a wonderful guest. We've got Chris Harrison, is a Brighton-based street photographer and graphic designer. Chris spent 4 years at art college studying graphic design and photography, often bunking off to spend extra time in the darkroom printing up his work. After art college, he landed a job at the world's biggest advertising agency, Saatchi Saatchi, where, as a designer, he got to commission and work with some of London's best photographers. In 2000, he decided to put the camera down as he put more time into traveling the globe and starting a family. A trip to France and a visit to an exhibition in 2016 reignited his love of photography, which has led him wandering and capturing the free-spirited streets of his home city of Brighton. Chris's work has been featured in various magazines and exhibitions, and he's been a winner and a finalist in the Gothenburg, Miami, Brussels, and Italian street photography festivals, as well as our own Aussie Street Photography Festival, just to name a few. Gives me great pleasure to welcome Chris to the Street Life podcast. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be talking to you, Mark and John. Yeah, thank you for inviting me on.
No worries at all, Chris. It's lovely, pleasure to meet you. Your street work around Brighton is I find it phenomenal. So let's start at the beginning of your foray into photography. So what made you want to become a photographer in the first place? And I believe it was an Elliot Erwitt photo that kickstarted your passion for the medium.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Elliot Erwitt was the way in for me. I was 16 and I'd been given a place at art college. I wasn't particularly academic at school, so the option for me was to kind of maybe skip A-levels. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at A-level and just go straight for a graphic design and photography course at art college, Lincoln Art College. And it was the summer before I joined, and we got in the post a list of kit we were going to need, and on that list was subscribe to a photography magazine, which I thought was a bit, I'm going to do graphic design, and why photography? I was a bit puzzled, to be honest. And anyway, I said to my mum, Mum, subscribe. Can you? I need to get this magazine. And a week or two later, it plopped onto the doormat. And I took it up to my bedroom, unwrapped it, and there was an Elliot Erwitt feature in there, and really that was it. I remember that moment so clearly, sitting on the edge of my bed, looking at this photo, thinking, what am I looking at? What is this? Who made this? Why did he make it? It's quite a confusing image. The image I'm talking about was the Great Dane, the Chihuahua, and the boots.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yeah. It's quite a visually puzzling picture because you've got the very long legs of the Great Dane, the owner of the two dogs, which looks like a woman who's wearing long leather boots. She's kind of cropped at the knee. And then you've got this little Chihuahua, which is in the frame completely. And it's just a really puzzling image. And I just remember staring at it for a long time thinking, what am I looking at? What is this? So many questions. And up until that point, photography just hadn't been, as a 16-year-old kid, it was not something that had been on my radar at all, apart from, the daily newspaper that would arrive at our house, and flicking through that and, Spot the Ball, which I don't know if you had that in Australia, but John's nodding. He remembers Spot the Ball. That was the, if somebody had said photography, I would have gone, oh yeah, it's where, a ball is airbrushed out of a football scene on a pitch and you've got to try and guess where the ball is. So yeah, it was a bit of the door kind of flew open and I luckily got to Lincoln Art College and they had a fantastic photography department and I spent a lot of time in there. Yeah, it was great. Really good.
So you're shooting Brighton, yeah? It's a seaside town for those that don't know. But a lot of your images don't really include the beach or the promenade or the wonderful Brighton Pier. I know because I've been there. It's stunning. It's that Victorian pier. You would think that, having those things, the nostalgia and that attached to them, you would want to get them in your images. Is there a reason why you've sort of steered clear from that, Chris? Or has that been a conscious thing? Or do you don't want to show Brighton in that way?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it is partly conscious that I'm not looking for the sort of typical essence of Brighton, in terms of what one might think what Brighton is. Like you say, a typical seaside town. So I didn't want to shoot it in an obvious way. I wanted to kind of look for something different. That question, what's different, is one that I think is kind of continually unfolding. And yeah, I find the kind of the details, the unusual moments, the kind of less typical look at Brighton a little bit more interesting for me. I suppose what I'm doing is I'm looking for the pictures that I would want to look at, and many seaside towns, not just in the UK, but all over the world, have been photographed, in all sorts of different ways, but mainly in the kind of straight way. And I find these kind of sort of overlooked moments a bit more interesting.
Can I just add to John's question there? Your photos around Brighton, they feature humans, but often not their faces. And is that a conscious decision too? Or is that just sort of comes with the nature of living in a smaller city and there's not as many people there?
Yeah, yes, another really good question. I don't think it was conscious. I think it's just visually what I find interesting to look at. I'm not really, I have tried, but I'm not really the type of photographer that is actually, I'm not very good at those kind of very crowded street scenes where there's lots and lots of people. I find that really difficult to do. I was out yesterday, and it's the end of July at the moment. We had some pretty good weather yesterday afternoon, and it was a Saturday, so the beach in the centre of Brighton down on the seafront was really, really crowded, and for me it was just way too overwhelming. I find it really difficult to shoot in that environment. So when Brighton gets a little less busy, when it kind of turns to the winter months and there's fewer people around, that's when it gets really interesting for me. When the light kind of gets a bit softer, there's just a bit more spaciousness. Yeah, that's kind of the kind of thing I'm a bit more drawn to.
So just touching on it, it sounds like we're hammering you about your style, but I find it fascinating because it is very, very interesting, and it is sort of a different to a lot of the styles that we're currently being pummeled with on that we spoke about earlier about, flash and light and shadow, which is what I like. Your work's very different. But what I have noticed at your work, Chris, is that it's almost got a whimsical, humorous type storyline to stuff where things just happen, oddities. Is this something that you're attracted to naturally? Do you go looking for it? Or are you just like a typical British person where you see the funny side in things?
Well, I like to think I see the funny side of things. Yeah, I do like. I mean, what you picked up on, John, is really accurate. Actually, there's okay. So I think that the best way I can kind of sum that up is there's this quote by Charlie Chaplin that I really love. He says, he said many very wise things, but one of his quotes is, trying to try and get this right now. Life in the close-up is a tragedy, but in the long shot, it's a comedy. And I think I discovered that quote, a little while after I'd started shooting, and I just thought, that really fits with kind of what I'm drawn to, what's happening naturally. There is the humour, but there is also a bit of pathos there as well, And I think that's just part of the human experience, isn't it? We're kind of it just seems to fit in some way. So yeah, the kind of whimsical stuff I like. I like the kind of humorous stuff. I like looking out for those moments that are kind of a little bit odd and unusual, but also yeah, I think the thing about them is that they just they can feel humorous in a kind of surreal way. I am drawn to the surreal stuff,
Yeah.
I do love Magritte as an artist, and just before we logged on to chat today, I was looking through a book of a designer that I really like called Storm Thorgerson, who did all of the artwork for Pink Floyd album covers during the 70s and many other bands. And he was heavily influenced by Magritte, and his work is very, it's got a surreal nature to it, and it's all photography, but it's constructive photography. It's not street photography that we know. But he's kind of taken that flavor of kind of surreal, a surrealist approach, and kind of used it in a commercial context. And I kind of quite like taking a bit of that and bringing it into the street. So yes, I do have to kind of think about that when I'm out. I do have to kind of try and be a bit tuned into what might look a bit surreal or a bit kind of unusual in that way. It's hard to kind of put words to these things because, they don't happen very often. So they're hard to kind of decode in a way.
Yeah,
and you sort of just come to it naturally, don't you? The things that you're attracted to, you see them quicker than other people, and you can possibly see how things are going to happen in front of you, or you hope are going to happen. Is that when you're ready with your camera, you're anticipating a possible moment? Because when I'm out shooting, I'm not looking to 5 meters in front. I'm looking there and beyond, and sometimes behind, Do you do the same, Chris? Are you anticipating what may happen when you see a situation coming together and you're ready? What makes you take the click when you take it? Because it's not just seeing that moment, is it? A good photographer is all about knowing when to press the shutter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm quite a slow photographer. I'm not a quick, I have taken shots that have needed to be, could only exist if I'm kind of, alert and ready, and they kind of happen and literally in a flash of a second, and then they're gone. I've got some shots like that, but I'd say the majority of my shots are a lot slower in their approach. I can see something. I'm more of a kind of, I see something, I walk up to it, I take my time with it. I might walk around it, shoot it from half a dozen different angles and shoot a lot of shots until I'm happy with it. So that's more me. But it's really, really slow most of the time. Not a kind of quick, miss it and it's gone type photographer. That I actually find that really difficult. And I think some of that comes from being a designer. I'm the kind of composition, the way kind of elements fall within the frame is kind of, I'm naturally just more drawn to that kind of thing. More of a chaotic, fast-paced scene is just, I can't really extract something from that. It's too hard for me. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you
slow
about
and steady wins the race, Chris, and you're doing a very good job of it. Sorry, Mark. Go on.
No, not at all. Chris, I do want to ask you about your graphic design work and how that may have influenced your photography over the years, but I can't let you get away without asking about the Coke cup shot. I just think it's an absolute cracker. It's almost a perfect shot with the Coke cup there. You got the bird, you got the human element in there as well. So how did that photo come about? And did you spend a lot of time getting that shot, or was it a bit of a lucky one shot?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because that shot is a bit unusual, where I sort of took things kind of to the extreme. It was on one of those days, very overcast. I'd walked it. That shot's taken right at the start of Brighton Pier, and it was on one of those days. I think I'd probably already been out for about 4 or 5 hours, and I was like, oh, bugger this, I'm ready. I was actually walking to go and get the bus home, and I kind of thought, hey, look, come on, just go back on the pier. Just go back on the pier for 20 minutes. You don't know what's going to happen. And I walked past this kind of weird plinth that's on the pier. I think they used to store deck chairs in. So it's kind of raised up a little bit. And there was this Coke cup that somebody had put on there. The wind had blown it over. And, literally, I kind of half-heartedly just held my camera up and went snap, thinking that's going to be crap, and carried on walking. And I kind of just flashed it up on the back of the screen. I thought, oh God, wow, that wave very nearly blends in with the branding on the Coke cup. And that was it. I thought, well, okay, maybe I can stand there. Maybe I don't know how long it's going to take. Maybe I can stand there and just see if I can wait for the perfect wave to kind of. So I did stand there. I stood there for like 40 minutes, moving around, adjusting, because I was using an M262, so you've got the whole parallax thing. So what I'm seeing and what's actually happening, so I had to kind of keep adjusting so that the wave, didn't meet up with the branding, but actually in the frame it would have done. in the final picture. So yeah, lots and lots and lots and lots of shots. And then the one where I happened to kind of nail the wave, this seagull flew into the shot. I mean, it was just, bizarre. It's bizarre how I kind of, was on my way home and I'd pretty much given up. And then bizarre how I kind of took this picture and in a really half-hearted way, I couldn't tell you, like pressing the shutter going, this is going to be crap. and then it led on to that, And people were kind of coming up to me because I've been there so long on the pier. People were like coming up to me and standing next to me going, what are you doing? What are you doing? I was like, well, it's a bit hard to explain, but, and this one guy came up and he really wanted to know what I was up to. And all got these waves kind of coming in. I was thinking, I can't keep talking to him because I've got to get the shot. And yeah.
It's an absolute belter. If anyone hasn't seen it, go on Chris's Instagram, have a look at it. It's just, it's a knockout. Well done.
Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. But it's interesting when you're doing what you're doing, and we know how we know what we're trying to capture and what we've seen, yeah. But the general public, 99% of them haven't got a clue, and they're watching you and they're going, "The hell is he photographing?" Like, because they might go up and take a snapshot. It's obviously of that Coke, yeah. But you're there for half an hour, and then they come up and they literally come up and go, "Excuse me, but what are you photographing?" You really can't see it. And then when you explain it, they go, "Oh, I get it." Yeah. Or then some of them go, "Oh, nut job." You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think most of them are saying, okay.
It's the UK.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, has anybody ever questioned you about that image and said you set that up?
No, a lot. The main comment, it doesn't happen very often actually, but some people say, "Oh, did you Photoshop it?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't Photoshop that." Another comment is, it would have been, well, why did you stay there for that long? You could have Photoshopped it and it would have been, done in a, so that's not the point. I know it really happened and I know it really existed, and that's enough for me. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to I wanted it to be natural and organic. I wanted it to actually exist for real.
Yeah.
And I think it is one of those shots that it does look, it could very much look photoshopped, but it isn't. And I think that does shine through a little bit. I hope that the integrity of that photo is there, actually.
It does.
And I'm certainly not questioning it myself, but you know what the internet is like, and we know as street photographers, and my experience anyway, is that the stuff that happens on the street that is coincidences happen a lot more than you realize, and people go, "You set that up," you know what I mean? But if you start looking, coincidences happen a lot, and things like that where things just line up perfect, and you've just got to be there to capture it, Chris.
Yeah, when you get tuned in and when you're kind of looking out for those kind of coincidences, whatever you want to call them, those unusual moments, you do start seeing them more often. I mean, anybody who does street photography, even if it's just for a few days, a few weeks, months, years, you start to kind of retrain your brain to look out for those kind of things, and then you just start seeing them all the time, and I think it's another illustration of how, if you're not doing street, or anybody who doesn't, this is not a judgment or a criticism in any way, but if you don't do the kind of thing that we do, you do miss a lot. You do miss a lot. Having a camera and being interested in, the world around us is helps you to kind of really take notice. Yeah.
It's interesting because I thought I used to be quite perceptive, because I used to be a person who would sit in coffee shops before there was mobile phones and people watch, yeah? So that's what I used to do. I used to watch people for hours, and I used to think I was quite perceptive. But then suddenly I got into street photography and I realised I've been blinking about 90% of the time. I didn't see anything, you know what I mean? So it's very interesting what you said, Chris, and it's a fabulous shot. And I just want to ask a question as well. So we all know what we like, and we all know what we take, and we know what is a banger on Instagram or whatever. But what's been your favorite shot? Has it been the shot that we've just spoken about, or has it been another particular shot that people may not be aware of that you go, you've got an emotional connection to it, what it took to get that shot? Do you have a favorite shot?
Yeah, I do have a favorite shot. It's really difficult to single one out, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's a really simple shot that I took. So I wouldn't say this is like a standout shot in the kind of, in the grand scheme of things. But one of the shots I really loved was taken during lockdown. It's on the beach in Brighton. And in Brighton, probably like in a lot of other towns and cities around the UK, we were, we spent more time outdoors because we were only allowed a half-hour walk or whatever it was. Anyway, a lot of walking going on. And in Brighton, house furniture got taken down to the beach. People would take sofas to the beach. We had quite a good summer that in 2020. And I think one day I was walking down by the beach and there was this guy sitting we got a very pebbly beach. He was sitting on the pebbles, and then about 20 feet away from him, somebody had taken a dining room chair, an old dining room chair, and they'd put that on the beach. So you just got this contrast of this guy sitting not in a chair on the pebbles and this empty chair, which I just thought was quite kind of poignant for the time we were in.
Yeah.
There was distance between the two objects. The chair was empty. He was alone. He kind of looks a little bit like he's meditating, and I think he's got a bald head as well. So he almost looks a bit monkish. And the sky's kind of a tiny bit mottled and overcast, but it's just got a really nice soft feel to it. And it's just a really simple, quiet shot, and I quite like it. And I usually benchmark, a lot of my shots with my wife. I'll come back after a day out or a few hours out. She go, first thing she say, "Oh, did you get anything good?" Like, "Oh no, but if I've got something that I'm kind of happy with, I'll show it to her, a little bit later and say, "What do you think?" And I showed her that shot I've just described, and she went, "Nah, not one of your best." and I remember thinking inside when I showed it to her, I thought, "Oh God, I really like this shot. Why can't she see it?" And even now, a few years later, she'll say, "No, I still don't think it's one of your best." Well, I really like it. So yeah, there's that one. Just I don't know why I like it. It just feels nice. Yeah.
You're not alone, Chris, because I do that with my mom. She goes, "Do you get any shots today?" I go, "I really got a good one." And I show her and she goes, "The same."
Yeah.
Not one of your best.
Yeah.
Do you have that,
Thanks.
Mark? You go, "I really love that." Just destroyed you.
It's quite interesting, Chris. You just mentioned the word quiet in your when you were talking about your favourite shot there, and I think a lot of your shots are very quiet in nature, aren't they? And one of the shots, we can go through all of your shots and talk about them, but I think one of the ones that I like is that ball of birds that you've captured out at sea. Not sure what birds they are, but they must sort of do that formation, often around Brighton. But I just think that's incredible. And you've got this your series Low Season. So where is this all heading? You've probably got enough work for a book now. Is that sort of what you're thinking? You'd like to make a book of this work?
Yeah, I would love to. In fact, I've spent a lot of this year going through my archive and kind of getting together the material that I want to have, in a book. And I'm I am going to kind of start a Kickstarter in September and see how that goes. See if I get enough kind of interest through that. And yeah, I've got a sequence. I've got an edit together of about 50 images. So that's always been the ambition. I think that's kind of, I love photo books like a lot of us do. I've collected quite a few over the years, and I've always thought how nice it would be to kind of use my design skills with the photography and kind of make that a nice little package. So I think if I can kind of wrap that up, the design, it's kind of interesting. I've been working quite a bit on it this year, and I've just been bringing kind of truckloads of perfectionism to it on the design side. It's a really interesting contrast where I can kind of go out with my camera and just have the sort of creative freedom of wandering around. But when it comes to, my day job, I'm like, right, got to make a really nice design project out of this. So I've been kind of tying myself up in knots a little bit with that one, particularly with the front cover. I've gone through quite a lot of different iterations, but yeah, hopefully by the end of the year, if my Kickstarter is successful, I'll that'll be ready. So that'll be a lot of fun. It has been a lot of fun. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to getting it. And you just mentioned your day job there. I was going to ask you, so you're a graphic designer. How does that sort of come through and influence your photography, or are they two separate things where you go out with the camera and you're not thinking that way, or is it all sort of just washing around your brain and that comes out in your photography as well?
Yeah, it definitely influences photography. Yeah, it's I was thinking about this the other day in that I through the 90s, I mean, I did quite a bit of photography for myself. But what I also did, it occurred to me that being in my day job as a designer and working in advertising agencies and design agencies, a big part of that work was just looking at other photographers' work, looking at other commercial photographers' portfolios. When I worked at Saatchi Saatchi, we used to get loads and loads of photographers' portfolios in to look through for projects or stock library books. So over the last 30 years, I've done a lot of looking at photographs, not just taking. In fact, I think I've probably done more looking than I have taking. And I can see now very much when I look at, the work that I've been doing out on the street in Brighton, how much of a link there is between the design work I've done in terms of looking at other people's photography and how it kind of translates into my own eye and how I see things now. And it's all those years of looking and looking. I can almost see photos now and link them back to other pictures that I've seen 20 years ago. And they wouldn't have been necessarily, street photographers' work or people working in reportage at the time. I'm looking through work, say, from somebody like trying to think of a name off the top of my head. Well, I mentioned Storm Thorgerson earlier. His the way he uses photography in his design, kind of quite sparse and spacious and a bit surreal. I mean, there's definitely a kind of link there. So I think what I've exposed myself to and taken an interest in seems to kind of be finding a way out now as well.
So, Chris, just touching back there, when you said that, you'd been a photographer through your time in college and you were studying and it was a huge passion for you. You mentioned that you bunked off to get into the dark room. So obviously, it played a big part in your life. And suddenly, with all things in our world, life changes come along and you decided to, when you have so many hours in a day and to put down a passion to pick up something else like world travel and starting a family. But you said you picked up the camera again in 2016. What made you pick up the camera again and reignite that passion and fan those flames?
Yeah, good question. I think, between 2001 and 2016, I started my own business. My wife and I, we had family, had got 2 daughters. So yeah, lots of time and energy went in that direction, being a dad, having my own business. And at one point I'd sold all of my camera gear. I think we needed to, our car was kind of clapped out and I needed to get a new car or a second-hand car. So I sold it. I think I had a 5D Mark II or something and quite a nice lens, sold it, put it towards a new car. And that was it. At one point I was left with no kit apart from a little point and shoot camera. And my eldest daughter decided she wanted to join Instagram when she was, I can't forget what age. So I joined it as well at that time, just to sort of be a good parent, to sort of see what this Instagram thing's all about, sort of, keep a bit of a kind of watchful eye on, what's going on her account and stuff.
Yeah.
Not that I needed to, but so I kind of started to see some photography, all sorts of accounts kind of pop up in the feed. And I was thinking, yeah, okay, this is interesting. I remember, this kind of stuff. I used to quite like this. But it was also a family holiday we took to France, to a campsite that wasn't too far away from Arles. And again, it took a really random connection. And just before we set off to go down to France, I'd read in The Guardian about the Arles Festival. And I was like, I've never heard of this before. This is a festival just dedicated to photography. How can that be? I didn't know that existed. And it's quite a long running festival in France, a very, very well known one, but I'd never heard of it. So I decided to kind of get a little bit of time off when we were on holiday and went to Arles just to check it out. And just saw some really great exhibitions. Saw Sid Grossman, who is a New York, I think he might have been a teacher actually in New York and a street photographer, although this is going back to the kind of 50s and 60s, and a joint exhibition with him Leon Levinstein and Harold Feinstein, and just looking at all this beautiful black and white work from the 50s and 60s and thinking, wow, it was like the Elliot Erwitt moment all over again. I was kind of standing there going, oh, you've forgotten about all this stuff. You know, life's kind of taken a bit of a different direction, and it was just a great reminder. And I, came back to the campsite where we were camping and sort of said to my wife, I've got to get back into this. I'm totally inspired again. This is really what I want to be doing with more of my time. Yeah.
That's great to see, and it only takes a little bit of wind to get those flames back, doesn't it? But I just want to ask a quick question before we get Mark to ask another one. So you took a bit of a break. Did you find that your style, how you saw the world, had changed from, when you put the camera down to picking it up 15, 16 years later? Did you find that you saw the world differently, or were you attracted to the same things?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I was generally attracted to the same things. When I lived in Sydney during the year 2000, and I had a film camera with me. I only bought black and white film, and I had Contax Aria, and I would spend weekends walking around from where we lived in Chippendale out to the eastern suburb beaches and back again. It was great. Mm-hmm. And I look at those contact shoots now, and I can definitely see that what I was looking at back then, 20 plus years ago, and what I look at now, there's definitely a similarity. So I don't think my kind of what takes my interest has changed, and that's actually quite surprising. When I compare the two, I'm drawn to the same thing. So it must be, I've changed quite a lot in that time. I've become a dad, and all sorts of different life experiences. But I think I only shoot digital now. I only shoot color. I don't do black and white anymore. Color just seems a lot more natural. It's just so much fun.
Well, tell us about that. So you got back from France. You just answered that. So you didn't go back into the world of film. You bought yourself a digital camera, and was it just a head full of steam getting back on the street from then on, or how did that all come about?
Yeah, it didn't. It was. I mean, my kind of eagerness and my energy for it was, definitely, pretty high. But it took another year and a half for me to actually properly allow myself more time to do it. And I think, I still had my own design studio then. I still employed a few people, and so getting time out, was really, really tricky. And I think I just got to a point where I was sort of sitting at my desk in my studio and thinking, I really need to be out. It was like a Wednesday afternoon or something, and I'm kind of sitting there at my computer, and the itch was just becoming so kind of, apparent that I really needed to give that itch a good scratch. So at the start of 2018, I kind of scaled back and went solo, and just recommitted to kind of making more time for it, which wasn't easy because like a lot of us, so ingrained in kind of having a day desk job, to allow yourself a bit more time out and allow yourself a bit more freedom it didn't feel very natural. But yeah, after a few months or a year or so, started to kind of get the balance right where I could kind of still be a designer and still pay the bills, but still kind of grab a few hours here and there a few times a week, enough to kind of build up a bit of a body of work.
And speaking of that, we had Jesse Marlowe on the podcast, and he said that he took around 10 years to do his projects. He had a black and white project back in early 2000s, and I think it's taken him 10 years to do his latest project. And how do you know when a project's ready and done, or is it still evolving, even though that you are probably going to make a book of it, later this year?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think the temptation is probably just to keep going and keep kind of making more pictures. And I can see that there's a benefit in that, because you might get some really good shots that you'd want to include in a something like a book. But I think there's also, I think for me, it was just more of a sense of, I've been walking up and down this kind of 1 mile stretch of Brighton seafront for 6 years or so, and I know it like the back of my hand, and it's kind of got to a point where, the shots that I feel worthy of including in a book, say, start to become a bit fewer and far between, or I keep looking at the same things, and so it starts to feel like a natural kind of break sort of presents itself in order to kind of go, okay, it's maybe time to kind of focus on editing now, maybe time to kind of take stock of what's in the archive, and and how that could be used in a book or a different project. And my mind is already kind of turning now towards what I might do next. Do I just want to do more of this that I've been doing, or do I want to kind of try something different? And I've got a couple of ideas floating around of how I don't really want to repeat myself, I suppose. But I know that, walking around Brighton with a camera in whatever capacity that might be is still the thing I'll do. I'm not sure if I'll be looking at Brighton in the same way that I have been for the last 6 or 7 years.
So just touching on that, it's interesting that you said, I was going to ask you a question about this, Chris, but you've said you've answered part of it. So I come from a small city. I've just moved to Sydney, and I've come from a small city in Adelaide, and I shot it for about 3.5 years non-stop, nearly every day, even through COVID, and found it really challenging to stay fresh and not, like the very words you've said, repeating myself, trying to find new stuff. How do you go about getting out there? You did it for 6 years, right? And I've been to Brighton. It's a beautiful place, but it's probably even smaller than Adelaide. Yeah, it's like seaside town. It's quite vibrant and busy, and there's lots of characters and interest there. But how do you stay fresh like that? And have you ever just thought about getting on a train and buzzing into London?
Yeah, the temptation is definitely there to kind of change location. And how do you sort of stay fresh in an area that you know so well?
Yeah,
it's a really good question. I think you just, well, I'll speak for myself. I probably just have to dig a bit deeper in terms of what's being a bit more curious, I suppose, and just. I do like the repetition thing. That really does it for me. The route that I walk tends to not change very much, in brackets at all. And I do think, why can't I just take a different route? Why don't I just go somewhere different? And I think, no, I'm going to stay on this route because this is the route I've chosen and this is the route I do. And just being able to see it with fresh eyes, I think, is part of the challenge. The light's always changing, things move around. There will always be something different to look at, and it gets harder and harder and harder. I'm finding it harder and harder the better I know that area, and I know it really, really well. So yeah, I think kind of the challenge is how curious can I be, how inventive can I be. That's another kind of thing that I think I appreciate in photography, the kind of inventive nature of it. So they're creative challenges, I suppose, like any other creative challenge. It might be when I get a design brief. I've done hundreds and hundreds of design briefs over the last 30 years. So how do you, I guess the nature of my design work, I'm very used to kind of approaching the same thing, loosely the same thing, over and over and over again, and trying to kind of carve something different out of it. So I suppose that's already quite normal for me to kind of not be too fazed by that and kind of go, no, because I know from my design work that it is possible to kind of hit upon something different under circumstances or situations that you've been in many times before. And I actually really like that challenge. I like kind of putting that up and having a kind of run up against it.
So, Chris, just touching on that and your expertise in that field, and then you've studied design and photography. Do you think it was important to go to college to get the skill set that you got, or do you think some of those things just come naturally? And do you think like having a piece of paper at the end of it to say you're a photographer is something that will make you better?
Absolutely not. I think in fact, a lot of my favorite designers are designers who didn't study design at all, and I think they're often the most interesting people. I can't think of any photographers off the top of my head. I'm sure there are many, many, many examples of photographers who haven't studied, haven't studied, lots who haven't studied photography, and I think you bring your own life experiences to it. There's a designer that I used to love called Bill Kahan. He trained as an architect. his graphic design work. He had one of the most successful studios in America at one point. His graphic design work was phenomenal. You know, he wasn't creating buildings. He was creating kind of logos and annual reports, and they were stunning. He was doing it like nobody else was doing it at the time. Really kind of set a kind of high kind of bar. And I think photography is probably a bit like that. If you don't come to it with, you know, rules, whatever they are, or a kind of received way of how things should be done, then you've just got a carte blanche to kind of explore and experiment. And so yeah, absolutely not. You know, I think qualifications are great, you know, to sort of give you a bit more experience or kind of a bit more exposure to new thinking or kind of history of art or history of design, history of photography. But I think, you know, an inventive nature and a kind of confidence just to kind of experiment and give it a go is so important. Yeah.
I just want to ask another thing, just touching on that. We were speaking to Don Stevie, and he was of the opinion, he mentioned in the podcast, that he believed that you can teach people how to see a scene or have that particular skill. My personal opinion, I don't think you can. I think a lot of it you can show some people some of the techniques, but I think a lot of it comes from within, how you see the world. What are your opinions on that?
I think you can. Okay, so my youngest daughter's really interested in photography. She's kind of very interested in it and very kind of interested in pursuing it as a career. But what I've done with her is shown her a lot of stuff. You know, from quite a young age, I've got my photography books out and I said, oh, you know, have a flick through this and, you know, pick out 2 images that you really like and tell me why you like them. So we, you know, oh, Dad, do I have to really? You know, God, I can't be bothered. Don't make me do that, please. No, just do it. You know. So often she really didn't want to do it, and then when she did, she'd sit there for like 15 minutes flicking through, and I know what's good about that is she's looking at every single shot and going, do I like this? Don't I like this? Why do I like this? Why don't I like this? And then she's, you know, having to pick 1 or 2 that she does really like and tell me why she likes them. So I think that's a kind of form of saying to somebody, you know, here's how you take a good picture. You take you learn to take good pictures by looking at other good pictures and getting a kind of more of a stable sense of what appeals to you. And she's definitely got that now. You know, she's 100% got that. You know, Trent Park is her favorite photographer. You know, she's only 17. You know, I've shown her some of his books, and you know, you know, on her A-level course they talk about Trent Park. You know, they talk about his work. So you know, I think my work's pretty much done in that department. She's kind of up and running now. You know, and she knows you know what a good shot is, and and hopefully I think the other bit, translating that into your own work, is really just lots and lots of trial and error, as you guys know. You know, you just got to be out there kind of chipping away to kind of get those shots. Yeah, like everybody else does. Yeah,
absolutely. So Chris, what inspires you outside of photography? We've talked about your design work. Do you get other inspiration from other art forms or mediums?
Yeah, definitely from other artists. I really love Keith Haring, the graffiti artist, street graffiti artist from the sort of 80s New York. I love his work. I've mentioned Magritte. You know, lots of kind of visual influences. Bits of music can really kind of move me as well. You know, bits of music, you sort of take you to a slightly different place, and you know, get those kind of different kind of energies kind of bubbling away. Art particularly.
So I'm just going to ask you a question. You mentioned that your daughter wanted to get into photography, okay, and you're into design as well as photography. Now there's a really big sort of scary looking ghost up on the AI is coming to the fore. Yeah? What are your thoughts on AI? Is it something to be worried about, or is it you're not bothered, or is it going to ruin the world as we know it?
Oh yeah, such a big question, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it is. It's a whopper.
It's a question that seems to be on everybody's mind at the moment,
Yeah, it
because
is.
it does feel very, very scary. I don't tend to focus on, are the machines going to turn on us and it will all become like
No,
Terminator one day?
No.
Maybe it will. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think from a sort of closer to home perspective, I do look at software like Midjourney and DALL-E image making, and I look at that and I think, whoa, that is a bit scary actually, because there's the question is, are we going to be made redundant? Are our jobs going to be taken over? It's really interesting to speak to my daughter's generation about this, because whenever I bring up AI with my two daughters, they're both very they're not really that interested in it, which surprises me. It really surprises me. I know that there will be many young people their age who probably are really, really interested in it, but they don't seem to be, fearful of it or that interested in it. And we went to an open day at a university a few weeks ago, and I asked the same question, John, that you've just asked me to one of the lecturers who was giving a talk on this open day, and he had a really, really good answer. He said that on their particular course, their design degree course, they kind of looked at AI from two perspectives, that you could either use it in a kind of augmentation context, or you could use it in an automation context. And they were very much looking to kind of bring AI into the course, but from an augmentation point of view. So how can AI help us to, improve design or look at design in a slightly different way? I'm not sure how that translates into photography, because that seems a bit more the kind of integration in terms of augmentation with AI into photography seems a little bit more confusing to me, or maybe a bit more black and white. Like AI either creates the image or it doesn't create the image. Maybe that's my limited point of view at the moment. I know that in most Adobe software, AI is now part of it's part of it, very much part of it.
It is.
And the tools, from a commercial point of view, can be very, very handy. If I'm working with photography in a commercial context, really handy. It's time-saving stuff. So lots of benefits, but also lots of kind of a bit of fear about where it's taken us.
Yeah, but it was a little bit like in the 80s with computers, when they first started coming out, there were big mainframes that took up massive amounts of space and rooms and floors, and now we have machines that are as powerful as the best computers in the 60s in the palm of our hands, but they haven't stopped us from being employed or all of those things, So I guess it's just one of the, it hasn't destroyed the workforce like they said it would, or maybe AI will. But I'm always interested to hear what other people have to say and how to perceive it, because we all have our own perceptions of what we've seen on YouTube, like Terminators coming and taking over. Yeah, but I was talking more like on your design thing side of things, and also photography, because the images have progressed so far in a very short period of time. You could spot them a mile off 6 months ago, and now it's getting harder. I work on hubs and getting sprung all the time. You know what I mean? It's like nightmare trying to pick what's an AI image and what is real.
Yeah.
Well, John, when AI learns how to make a podcast, we're stuffed. So
it won't be far away, Mark. We'll be redundant.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think I've not got a lot of detailed knowledge on this, but I think a lot of Hollywood actors are concerned in terms of their faces. Someone like Tom Hanks, their face has been recorded, out many thousands of hours of recordings of his face and his voice. So, how can that be used by AI in the future? And, mind-blowing where it could go. But I think in terms of what we do and what we're talking about today, the beauty of what we do, the beauty for me is that we actually step outside the front door with an object in our hands that's capable of recording real life.
Yes.
And we get to kind of do that. We get to kind of be upright and breathing and outdoors and not in front of a computer making that, not kind of typing our requests in terms of what image we would like. We get to kind of go and hunt that down. And I really, really hope that what we bring back, the integrity of those images will still be very apparent compared to something that's kind of being created on a keyboard by a very intelligent piece of software.
Yeah.
I always hope that there's going to be enough of a kind of something in the real stuff that kind of distinguishes it from the kind of artificial stuff. Now, that's my hope anyway.
It's all part of the game, isn't it? To get out there and get that image. I mean, if you can just type it in the keyboard,
Where's the
get
fun?
what you want.
Seriously.
There's no fun in it, is there?
Well, Chris,
no.
Chris could have typed in Coke, Coke cup, seagull, human, beach. Just AI, created his award-winning image.
Yeah. And if we see anything like that, we'll know that AI's stolen your image.
Exactly.
And we'll love to see you in court winning so we can all get behind.
Yeah. This episode has been sponsored by...
Chris, look, we've absolutely adored chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Now, you're about to go on holiday, I think next week you said, so I'm not sure if this answer this will determine how you answer this question, but we always finish the podcast with the same question. If you could jump on a plane and go anywhere and shoot tomorrow, where would you go and why?
Yeah, so I've heard you ask this question in other episodes, so I've a bit of a prepared answer. And I would love to go to Mongolia or somewhere like that. To those kind of that kind of remote nomadic type lifestyle. Living in a yurt, pick up the yurt, move on. With your kind of all your belongings kind of strapped to some livestock taking you across these amazing steppes. I would love that so much. Yeah, that would be where I would go tomorrow.
I think I agree.
Closely followed by Sydney, I think. Closely followed by,
Nice.
Yes, get me back to Sydney. I love Sydney so much. So yeah.
You've spent a bit of time here, haven't you, Chris, out in Sydney?
Yeah, I love it. Really love it. Like I said earlier, I lived there in the year 2000 and had a month in Oz last year. Yeah, can't get enough of it. It's just Sydney's just such a beautiful city. It's so beautiful. Just can't stop looking at it. Great, really lovely.
That's very pretty. Next time, come to Melbourne though. We'll show you a good time.
Will do.
Nah, don't go to Melbourne. You only want to go there if you want to feel like you're back in the UK, Chris. You don't want to do that. No, I love Melbourne too. I love it. It's a great city. But speaking of Sydney, have you bought Trent's new book, Monument?
I do have a copy of it. Yeah, I do have a copy. And it arrived a few weeks ago. It's amazing piece of work.
Isn't it stellar?
Yeah. Really incredible.
And just speaking on Sydney further, sorry, Mark, we're talking about Sydney now. It's good because you know what? 99% of people haven't gone, I'd really like to go to Melbourne. I go, you don't know anything. You know what I mean? So, but isn't it nice when you get the book and you've spent a bit of time in Sydney, you can go, now I'm starting to walk around myself and I go, oh, that's that shot that Trent did. And I've taken a shot there, nowhere near as good as Trent's, but I've taken a shot there, you know what I mean? And it's almost like going along and, looking for the spots where he's been because amazing work. Him and Narelle, his partner, phenomenal photographers.
Completely. I think when I was living in Sydney during that year 2000, the agency that I worked in was on Barrack Street in the CBD.
Yeah.
And it was a decent sized agency. So we used to get lots of kind of like books and magazines coming in. And I think I remember, I'm not sure, it was one of their books, landed in the studio on the creative director's desk. And I remember flicking through it going, wow, oh my God, wow, what is this? This is amazing, and totally regretting now that I didn't kind of buy some copies when I was living there in Sydney, but just totally, what a piece of amazing work they've done. I mean, the seventh wave stuff, I think, was the first stuff that I saw when I was living in Sydney. I was just blown away by it, completely blown away by it. It's so original and inventive, amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
stunning. Anyway, we'll end it there. That's wonderful. With the winner is Sydney. It was lovely talking to you, Chris. Thanks for joining us and giving us a bit of your time.
No worries. I love talking to you. Thanks very much for having me on.
No worries. Thank you, Chris.
Pleasure.